Joy Boy is the most legendary and the strongest pirate to ever live. A man so powerful that his haki alone was enough to bring even the king of the world to his knees. So have you ever wondered what would have happened if Luffy had been born with Joy Boy's full potential? How much would this change the story of One Piece? And more importantly, would Luffy finally be able to prevent every tragedy from happening? Or would fate simply create even greater disasters? The story begins just as it did in the original timeline, with a young Luffy spending his days alongside Shanks and the Red Hair Pirates in Fuchsia Village. When the mountain bandit insults Shanks, Luffy angrily eats the gum gum fruit. However, the moment he takes the first bite, an overwhelming wave of Conqueror's haki erupts from his body, and he instantly transforms into Gear 5. The sudden burst of haki completely shocks Shanks. In all his years at sea, it is among the strongest he has ever felt. Luffy, meanwhile, has no idea what just happened. At that moment, Shanks realizes just how important and dangerous Luffy will become in the future. Rather than leaving him behind, Shanks decides to take Luffy out to sea and allow him to join the Red Hair Pirates. Because Shanks remains in Fuchsia Village for a while longer, Luffy still befriends Ace and Sabo just like in the original timeline. After spending a few more years in the village, Shanks and Luffy finally set sail together. During their journey, Shanks personally trains Luffy in all three forms of haki, making sure he never becomes overly reliant on his devil fruit alone. After several years sailing with the Red Hair Pirates, Luffy realizes this isn't the adventure he truly wants. He tells Shanks that he wants to set out on his own and build his own pirate crew. Shanks respects his decision. Before they part ways, however, he tells Luffy everything he knows about the world government and the mysterious king of the world. He warns Luffy that a great war will one day engulf the world, and that he will be the one destined to stand at its center. Finally, Shanks entrusts Luffy with his treasured straw hat, gives him a small rowboat, and sends him off to begin his own journey. The East Blue Saga plays out pretty much the same. Luffy meets Kobe, defeats Alvida, and sets sail for Shellstown. There, he defeats Morgan and recruits Zoro as his first mate. At Orangetown, Luffy defeats the Buggy Pirates using nothing but his Conqueror's haki. After witnessing Luffy's overwhelming strength, Nami temporarily joins the crew as their navigator. The crew then sails to Syrup Village. When Kuro reveals his true identity, Luffy defeats him with ease. With that, Usopp joins the crew and they acquire their first real ship, the Going Merry. At the Baratie, Nami finally tells Luffy the truth about Arlong and asks for his help. Luffy immediately agrees. There, he also recruits Sanji as the crew's cook. Soon after, the Dawn Creek pirates attack the Baratie. Unfortunately for them, they don't stand a chance against Luffy's overwhelming power and are quickly defeated. Then Mihawk arrives at the Baratie. However, he's shocked to see that Luffy has effortlessly defeated the Dawn Creek pirates. Zoro still challenges Mihawk, and their battle plays out almost exactly like the original timeline. Although Zoro is defeated, Mihawk recognizes his potential. The crew then heads straight to Arlong Park, where Luffy and the others completely overwhelm the Arlong pirates and finally free Nami's village. This also means Nami gets to keep the 93 million berries she had saved for years. At Logtown, the crew gathers the supplies they need before entering the Grand Line. This time, Buggy and Alvida don't even dare interfere. Smoker still pursues Luffy, but he's completely outmatched. Luffy defeats the Marine Captain with ease. And with that, the Straw Hats leave Logtown and officially enter the Grand Line. The Alabasta Saga would play out almost exactly the same, except Luffy's overwhelming power makes every battle significantly easier. The Straw Hats still meet Vivi, travel across Alabasta, and eventually confront Crocodile. However, with Luffy's overwhelming power, Crocodile has absolutely no chance against him. Luffy defeats him without coming close to dying, and the Straw Hats successfully save Alabasta. The Skypiea Saga follows a similar pattern. The crew reaches the Sky Island, meets the Shandians and the people of Skypiea, and eventually confronts the Thunder God. But Enel quickly realizes that his lightning is useless against Luffy's rubber body, and he's completely outmatched by Luffy's haki. Luffy defeats him far earlier than in the original timeline, and the Straw Hats leave Skypiea with very few difficulties. Since neither saga changes significantly, let's skip ahead to Water 7, where things finally start getting interesting. When the Straw Hats arrive in Water 7, the shipwrights of the Galley Law Company examine the Going Merry and come to a devastating conclusion. The ship can no longer be repaired. Luffy realizes they need a new ship, but this causes a huge argument between him and Usopp. Unable to accept the idea of abandoning the Going Merry, Usopp challenges Luffy to a duel. Luffy accepts, and after a difficult emotional battle, he defeats Usopp. Heartbroken, Usopp leaves the crew. Meanwhile, Robin mysteriously mysteriously disappears and is later revealed to have been forced to cooperate with CP9, who have been secretly operating undercover in Water 7. When CP9 finally reveals themselves, the battle begins immediately. Although Lucci is incredibly powerful, he stands no chance against Luffy and is defeated almost instantly, while Zoro also defeats Kaku. Meanwhile, Nami, Chopper, and Polly fight Khalifa and Blueno. Since Sanji isn't there at the time, he misses the battle. However, Luffy eventually steps in and defeats both of them without much difficulty. After defeating CP9, the Straw Hats finally rescue Robin. Seeing how far Luffy was willing to go to fight the world government just to save her, Robin is overwhelmed with emotion and decides to return to the Straw Hats. With CP9 defeated, the crew holds a funeral for the Going Merry. They even invite Usopp to attend. As they say goodbye to their first real ship, Usopp finally realizes that what made the Going Merry special wasn't the ship itself, but all the memories they created with it. He realizes that even with a new ship, the Straw Hats can create countless more memories together. Overcome with regret, Usopp begs Luffy to let him rejoin the crew. Luffy immediately accepts him. Afterward, Frankie and Iceberg work together to build the Straw Hats' new ship, the Thousand Sunny. The crew also meets Garp, Kobe, and Helmeppo, who have arrived in Water 7 to check on Luffy. Before leaving the island, Luffy asks Frankie to join the Straw Hats. After some hesitation, Frankie finally agrees. With Robin rescued, Usopp back in the crew, and Frankie as their newest member, the Straw Hats set sail aboard the Thousand Sunny. Before arriving at Thriller Bark, the Straw Hats encounter Brook in the Florian Triangle. After hearing Brook's story, Luffy immediately offers to help him retrieve his stolen shadow. He also invites Brook to join the Straw Hats once they get his shadow back. Soon afterward, they arrive at Thriller Bark. Just like in the original timeline, Moria manages to steal Zoro and Sanji's shadows. However, when Moria eventually confronts Luffy, he stands absolutely no chance against him. Luffy transforms into Gear 5 and completely overwhelms Moria, defeating him before he can cause any more trouble. With Moria defeated, hundreds of stolen shadows shoot out of his mouth and race across the island, returning to their rightful owners. But before the Straw Hats can celebrate, Kuma suddenly arrives at Thriller Bark. The moment Kuma sees Luffy in his Gear 5 form, he is completely stunned. Tears begin streaming down his face. After everything Kuma has sacrificed for his faith, the figure he has been waiting for is standing right in front of him. Instead of testing the Straw Hats, Kuma decides to reveal the truth. He tells Luffy that he is secretly working with the Revolutionary Army and that he serves under Luffy's father, Monkey D. Dragon. Luffy is shocked by the revelation, but Kuma refuses to say anything more and simply leaves. With the battle over, the Straw Hats throw a huge celebration and officially welcome Brook as their newest member. The Straw Hats then set sail for Sabaody Archipelago. There they encounter several notorious rookie pirates with bounties exceeding 100 million berries, collectively known as the Supernovas. Soon after, Kami is kidnapped and taken to a human auction house. When a celestial dragon shoots Hatchin and attempts to enslave Kami, Luffy becomes enraged and punches him without hesitation. As expected, attacking a celestial dragon triggers an immediate marine response. However, the marine forces stand no chance against Luffy and the other pirates and are quickly overwhelmed. That's when Kizaru arrives. The admiral begins attacking the pirates, but when he clashes with Luffy, he gets an unexpected surprise. Luffy is able to fight back. Thanks to the hockey training he received from Shanks, Luffy can now properly defend himself against Kizaru, forcing the admiral to take the fight seriously. Just as the battle escalates, Rayleigh arrives and intercepts Kizaru, giving Luffy an opening to regroup. That's when Kuma suddenly appears. He tells Luffy that although he has become incredibly powerful, the rest of his crew simply isn't strong enough to survive the dangers of the new world. Luffy initially hesitates, but using his observation haki, he can sense the enormous difference in strength between himself and the rest of his crew. Kuma then offers to send each Straw Hat to an island specifically suited to their individual growth. Luffy finally accepts. Before Kuma separates them, Luffy tells his crew that they will meet again in 2 years. Then Kuma reveals one more shocking piece of information. Luffy's brother Ace has been captured by the Marines. Luffy immediately asks Kuma to send him to Impel Down. Kuma agrees and teleports Luffy directly to level 6 of the prison. There, Luffy finds Ace, Jinbei, and several other dangerous prisoners. Knowing that they will need as much manpower as possible to escape, Luffy frees the prisoners, including Crocodile and the others. Using Gear 5, Luffy even creates a key out of thin air, allowing him to unlock their cells almost instantly. By the time the Marines realize that a massive prison break is underway, it's already too late. Luffy and the prisoners fight their way through Impel Down and successfully escape. With nowhere else to go, Luffy returns to Sabaody Sabaody and asks Rayleigh to train him for the next 2 years. Since the Marineford War never happens in this timeline, Blackbeard never gets the Gura Gura no Mi. Whitebeard remains one of the 4 emperors, while Ace continues serving as the 2nd Division commander of the Whitebeard Pirates. After 2 years, the Straw Hats finally reunite at Sabaody. They then head straight to Fishman Island. Since this arc mainly serves as a showcase of just how powerful the Straw Hats have become, we'll skip ahead to Punk Hazard. When they arrive, they encounter Kinemon and Trafalgar Law. Law proposes an alliance to take down Kaido, and Luffy immediately agrees. The events on Punk Hazard play out mostly the same. Law and Smoker fight Virgo, while Luffy completely overwhelms Caesar. The Straw Hats destroy the SAD production facility, weakening Kaido's operations, and rescue Momonosuke. However, after Caesar is defeated, Doflamingo realizes that something is wrong and heads to Punk Hazard much earlier than in the original timeline. While the Straw Hats are celebrating, Doflamingo suddenly appears. Law explains who he is, and Luffy immediately attacks. The battle quickly turns into a 2-on-1 fight, with Luffy and Law overwhelming Doflamingo. Despite his strength, Doflamingo stands no chance against Luffy's overwhelming power and is defeated before the Dressrosa arc even begins. After handing the rescued children over to the Marines, the Straw Hats continue on to Dressrosa. Once they arrive, they quickly learn about Doflamingo's tyranny from Kiros. After learning about Sugar and her ability to turn people into toys, Luffy heads straight for the Royal Palace. He unleashes his Conqueror's Haki, causing Sugar to lose consciousness. With Sugar unconscious, everyone transformed into a toy returns to their original form. Since Ace is still alive, there is no Colosseum tournament, meaning Luffy never gains the Grand Fleet. Meanwhile, Sabo arrives in Dressrosa while investigating the weapons being manufactured there. When the two brothers finally meet, Sabo's memories suddenly return. Since he never saw the newspaper reporting Ace's death, Sabo had never recovered his memories of Luffy and Ace. Seeing Luffy again brings everything rushing back. Luffy is equally shocked to discover that Sabo is still alive. The two brothers embrace and break down in tears. After spending some time together, Luffy finally says goodbye to Sabo, and the Straw Hats leave Dressrosa behind. When the Straw Hats arrive at Zoo, they quickly realize that Sanji is missing. Nami explains that Sanji has been forced into a political marriage with one of Big Mom's daughters, and the crew immediately heads toward Whole Cake Island to bring him back. When Luffy finally confronts Sanji, Sanji refuses to return, but Luffy refuses to leave without him. However, Sanji soon discovers the truth about Big Mom's plan to eliminate the entire Vinsmoke family after the wedding. Meanwhile, Luffy forms an alliance with Capone Beg and agrees to help assassinate Big Mom. The wedding begins, but the assassination plan quickly falls apart. In the middle of the chaos, the Tamatabako explodes, causing massive sections of Big Mom's cake castle to collapse. Enraged, Big Mom immediately goes berserk. Luffy steps forward to confront her, but before they can fight, Katakuri intercepts him. The two clash, but this time, Luffy is far more experienced. After training under both Shanks and Rayleigh, Luffy has mastered Future Sight and is able to counter Katakuri's ability much more effectively. After an intense battle, Luffy defeats Katakuri. He then heads to Nuts Island, where Big Mom is waiting for him. The two finally clash. Despite Big Mom's monstrous strength and durability, Luffy's overwhelming power and advanced haki quickly give him the upper hand. After a brief but intense battle, Luffy defeats one of the 4 emperors. With help from the Sun Pirates and Germa 66, the Straw Hats successfully escape Whole Cake Island. Pedro also survives in this timeline, with one of the 4 emperors defeated by the Straw Hats. The balance of power shifts dramatically, and even before reaching Wano, Monkey D. Luffy officially becomes one of the 4 emperors. Now that Big Mom has been defeated, Jinbei finally joins the Straw Hats as they leave Whole Cake Island. When the Straw Hats arrive in Wano, Luffy meets Tama on a desolate beach. She introduces herself and takes Luffy to her home. To Luffy's surprise, Ace is there. Since Ace never died in this timeline, he returned to Wano to fulfill the promise he once made to Tama. Ace explains everything happening in Wano and tells Luffy that he plans to take down Kaido. Luffy immediately invites Ace to join their alliance, and Ace agrees. The Straw Hats soon reunite with the Akazaya 9 and Law to plan their raid on Onigashima. Unlike the original timeline, Luffy never went to Udon Prison, meaning he never gains the support of Kid, Hyogoro, or Kawamatsu. Soon, the raid begins. The Red Scabbards launch a surprise attack against Kaido on the roof of the Skull Dome, but despite their combined strength, Kaido eventually overwhelms them. Luffy and Law soon arrive on the rooftop and join the battle. For the first time, Luffy realizes that Kaido is unlike any opponent he has ever faced. Even after defeating Big Mom, the world's strongest creature is still powerful enough to push him into a serious fight. Meanwhile, Zoro and Sanji battle King and Queen. Just like in the original timeline, they eventually defeat their respective opponents. Across Onigashima, the rest of the alliance takes down the Tobi Roppo, while the traitor Kanjuro and the corrupt Shogun Orochi are also defeated. Back on the rooftop, Luffy finally overwhelms Kaido and defeats him. As Kaido falls, Onigashima begins plummeting toward the flower capital. Fortunately, Momonosuke successfully creates enough flame clouds to guide the island safely to the ground. After the battle, Admiral Ryokugyu arrives in Wano. Luffy immediately senses his presence with his observation haki and confronts him personally. Realizing that he has no chance against Luffy, Ryokugyu retreats. Having now defeated 2 of the 4 emperors, Luffy's bounty rises to 4 billion berries. With Kaido gone, the balance of power shifts once again, and Cross Guild rises into the vacant position among the 4 emperors. Sailing away from Wano, the Straw Hats arrive at Egghead Island, a futuristic research facility run by Dr. Vegapunk, the world's greatest scientist. Before reaching the island, they encounter Jewelry Bonnie and rescue her. Because Vegapunk has secretly been researching the forbidden history of the Void Century, the world government sends CP0 to assassinate him. Luffy clashes with Rob Lucci and immediately overwhelms him. When the Navy sends a massive fleet led by Admiral Kizaru and the 5 elders, the conflict escalates into the Egghead incident. But by this point, Luffy has become almost unstoppable. He defeats Kizaru before the Admiral can kill Vegapunk, meaning Vegapunk's worldwide broadcast never takes place. Then, an ancient robot from the Void Century awakens on Egghead, responding to the drums of liberation produced by Luffy's Gear 5. This time, Emmet doesn't need to release Joy Boy's stored haki to save the Straw Hats. Instead, after seeing Luffy's power, Emmet gives him the haki knot as a gift for allowing him to hear the drums of liberation once again. Luffy then unleashes his Conqueror's haki at full power, overwhelming the 5 elders and forcing them back to the Holy Land. With help from Dory, Brogy, and the giant warrior pirates, the Straw Hats, Bonnie, and Vegapunk escape Egghead before its destruction. And their next destination is Elbaf. The beginning of the Elbaf arc plays out mostly the same. Robin reunites with Jaguar D. Saul, while Luffy meets Loki and Scopper Gaban. Luffy believes Loki isn't the evil prince everyone thinks he is, and decides to help free him. At that moment, the God's Knights attack Elbaf. Gaban confronts Gunko, but after using Future Sight and seeing his young son Colin being fatally impaled, Gaban throws away his axe and surrenders to protect his son, causing him to fall into the underworld. There, Gaban explains everything that has been happening in Elbaf. Loki then asks the others to free him so they can fight the God's Knights together. Hadrudin initially refuses, believing Loki killed his own father, but Loki finally reveals the truth about his tragic past, changing everyone's perspective. After freeing Loki, the Straw Hats and the Giants return from the underworld and join the battle against the God's Knights. Luffy and Loki eventually defeat Gunko after she becomes possessed by Imu. As the God's Knights begin to lose, Imu decides to leave Holy Land and personally intervene in Elbaf. The moment Luffy and Loki sense Imu's overwhelming presence, they immediately head toward him. When Luffy finally sees Imu, he recognizes him as the mysterious king of the world Shanks warned him about. The battle begins. For the first time in years, Luffy realizes that he is facing an opponent who can genuinely challenge him. Even with his incredible power, Imu proves to be an overwhelming threat. Luffy realizes that his own strength alone may not be enough. He pulls out the haki knot Emmet gave him and releases Joy Boy's stored haki. Luffy then combines it with his own Conqueror's haki, while Loki unleashes his own. The overwhelming combination of their haki forces Imu and the remaining God's Knights to retreat back to Holy Land, and for the first time, the King of the World realizes that Joy Boy's successor has finally returned. And this is where our timeline comes to an end. Let me know in the comments what you think of this timeline, and don't forget to check out my other video where I created an alternate timeline in which Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji were reborn with all of their memories.